This lesson explains how to make a scatter plot on your TI-84 calculator. Here's a summary of the steps. First, you clear your calculator, and I'll talk about how to do that. Second, enter the data from the data table. Next, set up the stat plot. Then set up your window, your graphing window, and then graph the stat plot. So here's how that works. First, clearing the calculator. You want to go into your y equals, and if there are any equations there, you want to clear them out by pressing clear. Now when you do that, notice that if you go down far enough beyond y7, there's also a y8, y9, and y0. So if you think that your calculator hasn't been cleared, you might want to check those as well. So if that's done, then we can go on to the next step, which is entering the data. To enter the data, we press the Stat button and then select 1 or press Enter for Edit. And you'll see a screen like this. You'll see L1 for List 1 and L2 for List 2. If there's anything in the list, you need to clear it. So first, use the up arrow to move the cursor over L2 in this case, then press Clear and Enter, and you'll clear out that list. Go over to L1 and we'll do the same thing. Press the up arrow until L1 is highlighted, press Clear and Enter, and then we've cleared the lists. Now we enter all of the x values into L1. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then use the right arrow to move to the second list, and we'll enter each of those numbers into the list, starting with the first one, 8. Okay, now all of the data has been entered, and we go on to our next step, which is setting up the stat plot. So to set up the stat plot, you press second y equals, and you get this screen. Plots 2 and 3 should be off. 1 may be on or off. We'll select plot number 1 by pressing 1 or Enter. And the first thing you need to do is turn this particular plot on. So you make sure that on is highlighted. If it's not, press Enter, and that's what your screen should look like. Then use the down arrow to get to Type. For the stat plot that we're using, we're going to use this first type. If that type is not highlighted, for instance, if your screen looks like that, then you'll simply need to move the cursor over the first item in the stat plot list, the type list, and press Enter. Use the down arrow to get to the X list, and it already has L1 in it because that's where we put our L data, but if it didn't, you would press second and 1 to enter list 1, press Enter, and then second 2 to enter L2, then press Enter. And then you have the mark. This mark is the dot, the shape of the dot that's going to be made on your calculator screen for each data point. I'd suggest using this first one, this small square, because it shows up much better for the type of plots that we're going to do. So there you have the method of setting up the stat plot. Next, we need to set up the window. Now, when we think about the window, let's look at our data. Well, the data on the X column goes from 1 to 7. It's a good idea to set your X minimum a little bit below the lowest data item. So we're going to set X min to 0, X max to 10, and we can use 1 tick per number. So we'll set X scale to 1. So let's do that. We're going to set X min to 0. X max is already 10. X scale is going to be 1. Now when we look at Y min, the lowest y is 8. So it probably makes sense to make y min 0. And we notice that the highest y value is 44. So it probably makes sense to make y max a little bit higher. 50 is a good number. And we'll make a tick mark every 5 units. So we'll set up the y min, y max, and y scale like that. So it's going to be 0, 50, and y scale is going to be 5. Okay. And then after we've set up the window, the only other thing left to do is to graph it. So we press graph, and there's our graph. Now, you may want to plot an equation together with this graph, and that can be done. All you need to do is press y equals, enter your equation. In this case, I'm going to enter 6x plus 2, and then press graph, and you'll notice you have your data points plus the line 6x plus 2. If we were doing an exercise that involved line of fit, and you had an equation for your line of fit, this would show you how well you did in computing the equation of the line. So let's summarize what we did and give you something that you can put into your notebook. The first step that we did was we cleared the calculator, we went into y equals, and we cleared all the equations. And remember to get those last few equations, numbers 8, 9, and 10. Now, next we entered the data, we pressed Stat, selected Edit, and then cleared each data list by pressing the up arrow and then Clear. And then we entered the data x in L1, y in L2. Next, we set up the stat plot by pressing second y equals and selecting 1 for the stat plot. We turned it on by pressing Enter. We used the down arrow to select the proper plot type, pressed Enter. Then we selected our X list, and in your calculator it's probably already L1, but if you need to select L1, you would press second and the number 1. And then for the Y list, the Y coordinates, you needed to press second and 2 to select L2. Then you want to set up your window, and remember that when we set up our window, we looked at our data, first at the X's to select our X min, X max, and X scale, and then at the Y's to select the Y min, Y max, and Y scale. And we said that it was a good idea to make the X minimum just a little bit lower than the lowest X, the X max a little bit higher than the maximum value in the table, and to do the same for the Y's. And then finally, we pressed graph. And then if we wanted to also plot an equation together with the line, we can do that using y equals.